Hey guys, it's Fee. I am here for a very small TTC update and also with some information that I've gotten on the PGD testing that we're going to do. So let me start with the small, tiny update. According to the schedule that my IVF coordinator had put together, they thought that I would be starting stimming on December 1st, which would put my egg retrieval to somewhere around the 15th. Well, I guess my body had something to say about that. We are running about a week ahead of schedule. I had some events start occurring, and they came to the conclusion that the only thing that was preventing the red plague from showing up now, as opposed to next week, was the birth control pills that I've been taking. The last pill was supposed to be on this Sunday, the 23rd, and we are stopping them today. So as of today, no more birth control pills, or as I call them, no more serial killer pills, because I don't do well on those. They make me very, very cranky, and my body just doesn't like them. So I am glad to see them go. Monday is going to be my baseline scan, and more than likely, the stimming injections are probably going to start Monday or Tuesday. That's my best guess with that. So we're running about a week ahead of schedule. All right, so that being said, this last Thursday on the 20th, I had a consultation. It was a genetic consultation with my counselor that I was assigned from the PGD lab. My PGD lab is RGI. I believe they were previously located literally in Chicago, Illinois. Now they are in North Lake, which is a suburb. And they required a consultation phone call to be done that I had to schedule 2 weeks ago. That tells you how busy these people are. They told me that this call could last up to an hour, and of course I was thinking, what in the hell are these people going to talk to me about for an hour? Well, it ended up being about 30 minutes. And prior to this, they had sent me a big email with a whole family history questionnaire that they wanted to make sure I had ready because they were going to ask me all of those questions. So that was part of the call, them getting all that information from me. And they also sent me in advance a big packet on what PGD is and all the options there are and whatnot, most of which I already knew. But I will admit there were a couple things in there that was a nice bit of education, bits of things that I did not know about PGD. And despite them sending me this packet, I think they just assume that people aren't going to read it. And they go back through the whole thing again in this phone call. So pretty much the phone call was going through what PGD is in this big packet, getting my family history that they need, and of course talking about payments. As it turns out, they need payment before the egg retrieval. Now, here's the funny part about that. I believe I mentioned some of the costs of this prior. I don't remember if I mentioned everything, but the fee to biopsy the embryos for PGD is separate from the actual lab fee. Now, if you happen to be with a place that does all of it in-house, then you probably just get one big fee. I don't. I have separates. I have the biopsy fee, then I actually have the fee to mail the biopsies to the lab, and then I have the lab fee. The biopsy fee is $1,200, and as I learned, that is for the first 8 embryos. If you are lucky enough to get more than 8, they charge you another $75 for each one. Then there is a $350 shipping fee. I think I may have given you guys the wrong amount on that previously. It is $350 to ship these biopsies over to the lab. And then the lab, originally I did think that their charge was for regardless of the amount of embryos that you got, the amount of cells you sent over to them, whether it was 1 or 10. I didn't think it mattered, and of course that sounded a little bit strange to me, but I was just going to go with it. In the end, that isn't the case. Their fee is $3,000 that you have to pay in advance for the first 8 embryos that were biopsied. And if you, again, and it's the same number as the biopsying. So the first 8. And then if there is any additional, it's $250 for each additional embryo. So as you can imagine, this is going to add up. It's very hard to get your insurance to cover this. You have to prove chromosomal need and you have to prove infertility, which is, one of those is easier than the other. But as of today, they seem to think that if I can conjure up enough paper proof, they might be able to get at least part of this covered. I've had 3 failed IVFs, 2 miscarriages, 1 included a blighted ovum, which is known to be a chromosomal problem. They don't know a lot about blighted ovums, but they claim them to be caused by chromosomal issues. Plus we have my husband's morphology, which is the whole reason why we got jumped straight into IVF without even trying IUIs, because they flat out told us it would never work. So the insurance already has a letter on that part. So here's the funny part. They asked me for my insurance information today, and they asked me to sign a form saying that I understood that despite the insurance possibly paying for this, I would have to pay for it up front, because it takes up to 45 days for the insurance to say, okay, we'll pay for this. If you're lucky enough for the insurance to come through prior to the egg retrieval, then hey, that's great, but that doesn't happen most of the time. You have to pay for this up front and then wait for reimbursement. Well, here's the crazy part. All right, as you guys know, IVF is a big enough gamble. Well, this involves another gamble, because get this. All right, if you're familiar with having medical services done without insurance, most doctors will give you a flat fee that is discounted. But if you have insurance, they take the discount off and they charge the insurance the full amount. So if I'm paying for PGD out of pocket, it is $3,000. But if they are going to attempt to bill my insurance, it is $4,000. That's quite a difference. It's an extra grand. And originally I didn't think that was a big deal, but the bottom line is, if I say yes, try and get my insurance to cover it, then I have to pay $4,000 in advance as opposed to the $3,000. And then if the insurance says, no, we're not paying for it, I'm kind of SOL. So that's $1,000 gamble. In which way am I going to go? I don't know. I don't know. Part of me seems to think that if I can get some information from my previous OBGYN, who I was with at the time of the blighted ovum, and I can get my RE to send in everything they've got, which I don't think that part will be a problem, then maybe I have a small chance of at least the test being covered. Chances are the $1,200 biopsy fee will not get covered. That's just part of the insurance game. But I have to decide if I'm going to take this $1,000 gamble. I mean, that's not something I was prepared for. And I need to decide this over this weekend. I need to make a couple phone calls on Monday and get this rolling if I decide I want them to do this. And I'm thinking I'm probably going to have to pay a visit to my OB and say, hey, I'm not walking out of your office until you give me what I need, because we all know how doctors can be at that stage of the game. It's funny. Whenever I've needed paperwork from my RE for anybody, like I needed copies of the screening that my husband and I requested for cystic fibrosis to give to this lab. And the RE said, here, sure, we'll email it to you. I got it like 10 minutes later. Not a big deal. But, whenever you're dealing with a regular doctor, it's like pulling teeth to get anything out of these people. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. So that's my current dilemma. I need to decide what I'm going to do there. Now, as for the PGD, I was going to share a little bit of information on that. There's a couple of things that I didn't know about PGD. For those of you who may not be familiar, PGD is a test that typically they do at day 5 of the embryo's growth. They take what I thought, and I'm about to correct myself, they take one cell out of each one and send it on over to the lab to be tested for chromosomes, chromosomal issues. Essentially, if it's something that they can detect from a missing chromosome or an additional chromosome or half a chromosome, that's something that they can detect and say this particular embryo has an abnormality. Anything past that kind of abnormality they cannot detect. Obviously, there's always a risk of birth defects with every pregnancy, whether you're doing IVF or otherwise. PGD cannot prevent or detect anything like that. It's only detecting chromosomal abnormalities. And the fact of the matter is, if you have an embryo with a chromosomal abnormality, about 90% of the time, it's either going to miscarry or it's not going to implant in the first place. The other 10% of the time, the baby will either be born with Downs, if that's one of the chromosome issues that you happen to have, or there's a number of other ones that I don't remember the names for, but they are much, much more severe, and most of the time the baby doesn't live past 1 year of life, which is quite sad. So their PGD is essentially trying to rule out all of that and tell you which ones are the good ones, so to speak. And normally that's done at day 5. Now here's what I didn't know. There's numerous different ways that they can do this. They can do this at day 1, and it's a different type of PGD. They can do it at day 3, or they can do it at day 5. Day 5 has the highest percentage of successful detection. It's actually 95%, which is a higher number than I've given you guys in the past. I thought it was 80. It's not. It's 95% if it's done on day 5. And of course, if the biopsies are good. The other part concerning the biopsy is this. I didn't know this. It's not one cell that they take. It's 2 to 5 cells per embryo. And I always wondered, what does that do to the embryo? You're like stealing part of its goods. And essentially it really doesn't matter, because at day 5, your embryo has over 100 cells. And if you take a couple, it's just going to recompensate. The other part that I did not know is where they take the biopsy from is from the very outside of the embryo. And those cells typically become the placenta. So they're not taking cells from the part of the embryo that actually becomes the baby. I found that to be really interesting. All right, what else do I have here? Past that, the other numbers they gave me, I've got a bunch of notes here. The other numbers they gave me, of course, not numbers I wanted to hear, but they're good to know. I am 36, and of course, once you hit 35, everything fertility-wise tends to take a nosedive. As an example, back in February, my AMH, or my egg reserve, was 3.1. As of right now, it is now 2.5. I'm not complaining. Those are still awesome numbers. I am very, very happy with those numbers. But I find it interesting that it went from 3.1 to 2.5, and it hasn't even been a year, and I am 36. So, if it keeps heading that direction, that's not a good thing. You want between 2 and 4. Anything under 2, and they consider your reserve to be depleted or in the process of being depleted. So that's interesting. And at 36 years old, they told me that embryo-wise, for PGD, I should expect 45 to 50% of my embryos to be chromosomally abnormal, as in bad, as in ones that will not be suggested for transfer. That's scary, because that's just taking me into account. That's not taking my husband into account. Now remember, the reason why they want us to do PGD, despite the fact that we wanted it in the first place, the reason why the RE suggests PGD is because my husband's morphology is 3%. That means 3% of his swimmers are good to go. It's not a count issue. It's just, it's an issue of having heads and tails and swimming correctly and looking proper and all that kind of stuff. 3% of them are good. That's a very, very low number. And when you get to that stage of morphology, there's a very, very high risk of the union of the egg and the sperm not to be good. Very, very high risk of fragmented DNA, of chromosomal problems in the embryos. So you take that and you pair it with the percentage that they're giving me just based on my eggs and my age. It scares me a little bit. But in reality, this whole thing scared me from the moment I decided that we were going to do this, because it is true. You could go through all of this and the PGD could tell you, sorry, none of them are good. It's just the gamble you got to take. I am going to hope and pray and do everything else I can think of and hope that we at least get one or two good ones would be great. So I'm not, at this point, I am not expecting to get a whole bushel of good guys. I'm really not. The numbers just seem to be against us. And then on top of that, remember, I've got the natural killer cells, I've got the MTHFR. I'm kind of hoping that we get a chromosomally awesome embryo out of this, and it wants to implant despite all of those issues. That's what I'm hoping for. Past that, we wait and see. We wait and see. What else do I have here? I want to make sure I didn't forget anything. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I found this to be interesting, is when you get the report back for PGD, it takes, for the lab that I'm using, it takes 7 to 10 business days for me to get this back. So 7 to 10 business days after my egg retrieval, I will find out what's normal, what's abnormal. The other thing you find out is ones that they couldn't get a clear answer on. Now there's a particular word they used for that. It doesn't mean that they're bad, it doesn't mean that they're good, it just means that either A, the biopsy wasn't good enough, or B, there was human error involved and they couldn't get a clear answer, or something about the biopsy just didn't give them a clear chromosome number. And apparently the 95% factor of PGD being accurate, it's the other 5% that these fall under, because it's humans doing these tests. So you've got human error both in the test and in the biopsying part. And of course, you never know what's going on with the embryo. They could just be biopsying at, I don't know, in the middle of a cell division. Who knows? If there are any that they don't get a clear answer on, they tell you that they don't know if it's normal or abnormal, but they also tell you that they don't suggest those for transfer. So at that point, if you get a report that includes one of those, it's really going to be up to you whether or not you want to take that risk or not. Now, the other thing you could do is have it re-biopsied and that particular embryo retested, but we get right back into all of those fees. So right off the bat, I can tell you we probably would not do that. We probably would put that one in and just hope for the best. So that's it. That's all I've got. I don't want to make this too much longer. My TTC videos seem to always be like forever. Sorry, guys. Hopefully I don't bore you to death. That's it. So I have my appointments on Monday. I also need to figure out what I'm going to do about this insurance thing. Baseline scan is on Monday. Chances are the stimming is going to start on Monday or Tuesday, which puts us a week in advance. So if I do well and my body does everything that it's supposed to, I would think that I would be having an egg retrieval somewhere around maybe the 8th or the 9th instead of the 15th. So we'll see. We'll see. Here's hoping. Here's hoping. Full steam ahead, right? Full steam ahead. As far as I'm concerned, my body wants to do this. I had a friend tell me that earlier today when I told her that we were going to now be running a week ahead. She said that meant my body was ready to be a baby baker. And you know what? I'm good with that. So we're going to go with that one. My body is ready and we're moving forward. So I will talk to you guys TTC related stuff as soon as I've got something to tell you. Probably sometime during stimming or when the stimming starts to be towards the end and we're getting close. I will keep you updated. Thanks for watching and thank you for all the support. Bye.